In today's episode, we will dive into the depths of cultural contradictions between Ukrainians and Muscovites by considering the lives and legacies of Taras Shevchenko and Alexander Pushkin. We'll compare their works and life path, explore the role that Pushkin took in Moscow's propaganda during his lifetime and still does today. No wonder that all the time until 2014 Muscovites were very active and no less methodical in imposing the greatness of the Russian language and culture, in particular though the use of Pushkin. While doing so, Ukrainian culture, language and literature were denigrated in every possible way. They denigrated absolutely everything Ukrainian. Street names, monuments, lessons of the Muscovite language and literature in Ukrainian schools. This is a creeping occupation of Ukraine that lasted for more than 30 years. In other words, for many decades Pushkin was, and still is, in some ways a weapon of the Muscovites against Ukraine. Furthermore, Ukrainian communists offered to celebrate Pushkin's anniversary at the national level. There was even a resolution to that effect submitted to the Verkhovna Rada. It sounds like a complete nonsense today. The reason for this is easy to understand. Our communists, who were dancing to the tune of Moscovia, tried to divert attention from the 200th anniversary of Taras Shevchenko and turned it to Pushkin. It didn't work out. This is yet another Muscovite subversion against Ukrainian statehood. Now let's talk about what Pushkin actually thought of Ukraine. Being in Ukraine, he perceived this territory as strictly Muscovite. He either didn't reflect Ukrainian realities in his works of the Southern Cycle or received a Russian adaptation. For example, Kyiv was perceived by the poet as the sanctuary of Russian cities. It means that his views, despite their exemplary culturedness, can be easily attributed to the usual Muscovite imperialism, nothing new. For Putin, he clearly has someone to look up to. In theory, Poltava by Pushkin can be viewed as a Ukrainian work in quotes. There is no doubt that this poem, written in 1828, was conceived earlier during his stay in the south. Poltava reflects the impressions of Ukraine and its nature. However, the poem can hardly be called pro-Ukrainian. In this poem, Pushkin consciously argues with Byron and especially Ryleyev, who portrayed Mazeppa in a positive light, presenting him as a fighter for the freedom of Ukraine. In his Poltava, Pushkin glorifies from the perspective of an older brother, Mazeppa's rival, Tsar Peter, which is not surprising either. In fact, it was one of Pushkin's first apologetic imperial works. What is curious is that Russian critics weren't particularly enthusiastic about it. Obviously, Poltava is completely untruthful and anti-Ukrainian. Moreover, Gogle is worth to be mentioned here as well. It's a well-known fact that Gogle adored Pushkin. During the first half of the 1830s, they communicated a lot. There is no doubt that Pushkin had essentially affected Gogol. He even suggested him plots for certain works, such as The Government Inspector and Dead Souls, and helped him while working on his Petersburg Tales. Yet, it's reasonable to wonder what this influence was. Actually, Pushkin contributed to Gogol's Muscovization, his moving away from Ukrainian issues and turning to Muscovite ones, which once more proved that Pushkin was an imperialist by conviction. For example, he supported the Russian imperial idea in every possible way, such as wanting to be secretary to the bloody General Yermolov, who occupied the Caucasus, and glorifying the bloody capture of Warsaw in his poem The Capture of Warsaw. Even one of his contemporaries, Prince Vyazemsky, called it glorification of massacre. And here we are again with the capture of Warsaw. Those are familiar themes that we have recently heard in Putin's interviews. Pushkin was a super Hulk during the Polish uprising of 1830. He wrote, "We can only pity the Poles. We are too strong to hate them. The incipient war will be a war of extermination, or at least it should be. Yet the Poles must be stifled and our slowness is agonizing." Of course, his imperialism and chauvinism were also expressed in his poetry. For instance, here are quotes from his poem with the telling title "To the Slanderers of Russia." "Why rave ye, babblers, so, ye lords of popular wonder? Why such anathemas 'gainst Russia do you thunder? What moves your idle rage? It's Poland's fallen pride. It is but Slavonic king among themselves contending. Which shall stand fast in such commotion, the haughty Lakin or faithful Rus?" But even about Muscovia, Pushkin wrote very interesting, often controversial things. We bring to your attention a few more quotes. "I certainly despise my fatherland from head to foot, but I am vexed if a foreigner shares this feeling with me. You, who are not on a leash, how can you stay in Russia? If the Tsar gives me liberty, I will not stay a month." From a letter to Vyazemsky. What should have been said, and what you have said, is that our modern society is as despicable as it is stupid, that this lack of public opinion is indifference to everything that is duty, justice, right and true, to everything that isn't a necessity. From a letter to Chadiev. Lastly, a chauvinist is always a slave. From the same last letter. Though I am personally heartily attached to the sovereign, I am far from enthused by everything see around me. Now let us recall the words of Taras Shevchenko. "Keep fighting. You are sure to win. God helps you in your fight." These words are extremely relevant today. Just compare this attitude to their home countries. Though whether Muscovia is a home country for Pushkin is still a big question, but that's a whole other story. Feel this contrast. On the one side, there is sincere love and hope, while on the other, there is fierce disgust and sometimes outright hatred of the invaders. Taras Shevchenko was very fond of Ukraine, and he urged and still does for others to do this. In Ukraine and abroad, Kobzar is considered an apostle of truth and genius and a prophet. To this day, his sincere words are still very relevant. By the will of history, he is identified with Ukraine and, together with its existence, is continued by it, absorbing new days and new experiences of the nation, reacting to new pains and thoughts and becoming a new tables of fate, wrote Ivan Zuba. Shevchenko's sayings about Ukraine truly reflect his great patriotism and love for his homeland. Here are some more of his quotes about Ukraine. "I so love her, so love my poor Ukraine, that I will curse the holy God. For her I will destroy my soul." Those are extremely strong words, we believe. Furthermore, let's not forget that during Taras Shevchenko's lifetime, there was no such things as the independence that Ukraine has today. And at the same time, we also believe that Ukraine is still fighting for its ultimate independence, which Taras Shevchenko dreamed of so much. Another quote from Taras Shevchenko. "Our epic and our ancient song forever shall remain, and that is where our glory lies, the glory of Ukraine." In these words, Shevchenko reminds us that we need to be Ukrainians to feel ourselves Ukrainians, about the importance of Ukrainian culture and language nowadays, since it's the beginning of the nation. Remember that Shevchenko was forced to write in Russian. We can only imagine what a torture it was for him. By these next words, we would also like to emphasize the importance of Ukrainian consciousness for future generations. Love your dear Ukraine, adore her, love her, in first time of evil, in the last dread hour of struggle, fervently beseech God for her. In these three quotes, we can see the outrageous warmth and love for Ukraine. This particular quote is a prophecy, as Shevchenko seemed to feel and know the future and what we would have to go through, that Ukraine is its society and people. Let's also chat about some fascinating and little known facts from the Kobzar's life. Taras' favorite drink was tea with rum. Not everyone knew this, we are pretty sure. Shevchenko was more valued as an artist than a poet during his lifetime. He was a favorite student of Karl Breuilov, and in 1860, he was honored with the title of Academician of Engraving from the Imperial Academy of Arts for his engraving of Rembrandt's painting The Parable of the Workers in the Vineyard. The poet always dressed pretty fashionably, as he earned good money in St. Petersburg, and as a successful portrait painter. According to his diary, he was very pleased to buy a rubber Macintosh coat for 100 rubles, which was a considerable price for the time. This also clearly shows the talents of Taras Shevchenko, as talentless people are not paid that much. Let's also talk a bit about the poet's personal life. As is often the case with sensitive creative personalities, Taras Shevchenko fell in love numerous times during his life. He was attracted to women like his fellow villager Oksana Kovalenko, Polish seamstress Dunya Huskowska, model Amalia Kolberg, Princess Varvara Rybina Volkonoska, Colonel's wife Hanna Zakrevska, and Anna Yuskova. After returning from exile, Taras fell in love with the 14-year-old actress Katerina Pionova, and his last love was the 20-year-old Likera Polusmak, a maid. Taras dreamed of finding the true love and creating a family until his death, but he never had a long-term relationship with anyone. Moreover, some say that the poet had an affair with Mikhailo Maximovich's wife, Maria, as 9 months after beginning of their close relationship, the Maximovichs had a son. Still, many historians dismiss this as a rumor, as Mikhailo was a very close friend of Taras, and the poet couldn't have done this to him. There are also interesting facts that became known after Kobzar's death. 500 square meters is the area of the largest portrait of Kobzar. It was painted in Kharkiv on the wall of a 17-story building at Sadovy Passage 30 and is listed in the Ukrainian Book of Records. This natural was painted at night for 2 weeks. Here's another curious fact. The world's smallest edition of Kobzar measures about a half a square millimeter, which is less than a poppy seed. Its creation was made by Ukrainian artist Mykola Sadrysty. The pages of the completion can only be turned with the tip of a sharpened hair because of its incredibly tiny size. Moscovia was openly terrified of Taras Shevchenko, and even more, that still continued after his death. Its fear of him was the same as its fear of Bandera, since there was an understanding that such people are capable to wake up the consciousness of Ukrainians, and that is why they fooled Ukrainians with Pushkin, Fat, and other Muscovite so-called classics. So friends, please tell us in the comments what is your favorite writing of Shevchenko's. When did you last read Kobzar? Remember to share this video as well. Let's spread knowledge about Ukraine in the world together. Support the armed forces and work for victory. As Taras Shevchenko said, keep fighting, you are sure to win. God helps you, we will win.